Hello guys, it's John with returning another Beyblade discussion. This is one of those Beyblade discussions where I don't really interact with the camera, I just sit back here and talk about a topic. Also, there is some kind of product listing news I'm going to talk about first, and then afterwards I will tie that into the discussion topic. So first up, the product listings were leaked for February of next year all the way through May. So of course, you already know the November releases, but if you want a refresher on the December and January stuff, December, we were supposed to get a starter, Rand Booster Volume 5, and a BX00 booster, likely a new remake bay, assuming they're sealed. And also for January, we have a UX booster. That's actually the other thing I forgot to mention. The starter and a booster and, well, booster for January are all UX products. Only BX product there is a remake bay, but I think those will just probably stick to being called, BX. So, anyway. Moving on to the actual leak here. So for February, we have BX39, a random booster select. So another BX product there, very interesting. So a random booster select, sure. Then March, we have a ton of stuff here. We have, BX40 launcher, BX41 rubber grip A, BX42 rubber grip B, BX43 gear case, also another BX00 release. This is a starter again, likely a remake bay. But then we have CX01 starter A, CX02 starter B, CX03 booster, and CX04 entry sets. Yeah, CX, this is the third line of Beys for Beyblade X. Comes out in March. April, we have UX14, a starter, as well as CX05, random booster volume 6, and for May, CX06 random booster selects. Yeah, unfortunately, random booster selects are not going anywhere, but anyway. So yeah, CX is a thing. Our third line of Beys, and I immediately have to ask, are they going to try and actually balance three lines of Beys? I kind of doubt that, and that's kind of where my discussion topic comes from, which is, are we done with BX Beys? And I'm kind of thinking we might be, so ever since the start of quote-unquote Beyblade X Season 2 in October, we have one BX Bay for November, of course, Crimson Garuda. We already know about that. As well as a random booster select bay in February of 2025. So, the thing is though, so when you go back to UX, when that came out in March of this year, ever since then, the BX bays have been interesting. Tire No Beat came out the next month, but I mean, that was like right after, so that's not too unusual, but aside from that, like the, Pendragon Bays were the main BX bays we had three of them, and I think Crimson Garuda kind of just pairing with them, which makes sense to like the BX Bay, Whale Wave. I mean, it could have been a UX Bay, honestly, but I guess they kept it BX, and then the February Bay could be another outlier like Whale Wave, or maybe a Gaia Dragoon-based Bay. That could fit in with the other Pendragon Bays and make sense as a BX Bay, but yeah. Clearly, BX is not really much of a focus anymore. So it makes me wonder, are they done? I mean, yeah, there's only, from, again, October through May, with, again, this quote-unquote Season 2, that's 8 months of releases, and we only have 2 BX releases, a booster in November and a random booster select in February. That's really not a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is their kind of system that they go with. So we get, kind of, I guess, mid-season, we get a new system, and it's kind of a mix of the new system and the old system. And then once you get to kind of year 2, that new system really starts to take over. The old system takes a backseat, and then eventually in the middle of that year, we get a new system, and then it's a mix of that new one and the one we had going for a while, and the old one is now just kind of phased out at that point. I could see that happening, and I think that might be what happens here. I think February being a BX release could kind of symbolize that. Like, yeah, here's one last new BX release. I think you could kind of attribute this to kind of how they might be trying to scale these bays. So first up, BX bays, they don't have like crazy gimmicks. It's all just kind of based on like the shape of the bay and stuff, or kind of concept. UX did this as well. I think they went a little bit crazier with the concepts. So eventually, I think BX kind of caught up, and UX obviously has gimmicks now. They're much more dynamic, so I don't think we're going to be moving parts on BX Beys. And of course, the CX Beys, well, they'll probably be divided blades, I'm assuming, and if that's true, well, you can again still attribute things like shape or gimmicks to divided blades, whereas you can't kind of work that backwards, where you aren't going to see divided BX Beys or divided UX Beys, I don't imagine. So I think they might be trying to kind of add a new layer in each of these eventually, and kind of phase into them over time. So BX Beys would kind of just exist and not do a whole lot, I feel. So there's not really much of a reason for them to even exist anymore. And again, we've kind of been seeing that they are being phased out. I mean, yeah, you have some bland BX Beys, especially the earlier ones, but even things like, Cobalt Dragoon from recent days. I mean, yeah, it's a left spin, but aside from being a left spin, what does it do? It's kind of just the basic attack type, if we're being honest. But then you have things like Whale Wave, which Whale Wave, this thing is pretty dynamic. The shape of this thing is, meant to kind of have powerful downward attacks, which it does. Has the 580 ratchet with which pairs very well with that. Of course, wants to be taller, makes sense. And then Elevate gives it a unique function on the extreme one that kind of lifts it up a bit to have a better extreme dash that works well with the blade. Very intricately designed bay, I'd say. But when you look at things like Drawn Buster from UX, well, that thing has like kind of a main contact point. The ratchet pairs with that, and then the bit Excel, having more gears on the bit for the extreme line makes it go faster, and the extreme line is kind of one big impact, pairs well with the identity of the blade. And I feel like something like Whale Wave and Drawn Buster, while different conceptually, I feel like the design philosophy behind them is very similar, which is why I think UX, you're now seeing more gimmicks to kind of better differentiate them from BX Beys. And I think with that, like, the difference between BX and UX, I feel like either it was going to just be very stupid, and they were going to be almost indistinguishable aside from like the kind of physical traits kind of being forced onto them, removing the gear chip cover and the gear chip being stationary, or they were going to add on to UX Beys like they did, have gimmicks, make them more interesting, whereas BX Beys kind of get left in the dust a little bit and now feel kind of uninteresting. I think it was kind of smart for them to wait on that to some degree, because if you're doing a mix of BX and UX, I think having, bays that are crazier with gimmicks and then having kind of bland bays, it gets a little bit harder to get excited for the BX bays, I'm not going to lie. But kind of phasing out now, kind of letting UX take over, having CX coming up, I think this would definitely be a good time for BX bays to be phased out. I think we might be done with them, honestly. I want to know what you think about that, though, because again, should BX Beys be phased out? I personally think they should, and again, I think that we're going to hit a point to where they would be either A, indistinguishable, to where they're going to have to start adding gimmicks and stuff onto these things to make them interesting, or B, just underwhelming overall, I think. UX Beys weren't that crazy to begin with, and that's why BX was able to still feel interesting, but at this point, I don't see BX keeping up that well. I know things like Crimson Garuda are also, pretty interesting, especially with the, trans point bit, of course, having a mode change to it. But it's not Blade related, so, no moving parts on the Blade or anything like we've gotten recently with things like, Silver Wolf, Nightmail, Samurai Saber. But, yeah, I just don't see BX really keeping up with that. Nor should they, honestly, and with that in mind, I just think it kind of makes sense for BX to be phased out. I mean, yeah, you can kind of have this thing where a new system comes out, progressively takes over, kind of getting that, new year sort of deal with a new season of the anime, well, quote-unquote season, but again, letting it truly take over there, and then just kind of letting the last couple releases of a system finish up before then getting into a new system in, around March. That makes sense. And I think, yeah, BX, I think it's served its, purpose. I think it's time to move on from it. I think it'd be kind of stupid to try and balance, 3+ systems. I just don't see it happening. I think these systems might be trying to kind of build on one another. Again, like I mentioned, shape for BX, which then with UX Beys you have that plus gimmicks, and CX you'd have both of those plus, divided blades. So with all that in mind, yeah, I think it's about time to move on from these. I just don't see them being overly interesting. Also, just to add on one last thing here, this isn't really related to BX, but you might be wondering, well, if, CX comes out, we have divided blades with gimmicks and stuff, wouldn't UX Beys feel kind of bad? But I think what they might do, I think CX Beys might be gimmickless for a while, and then UX Beys have the gimmicks, CX Beys, they have, just the divided parts, and then eventually we'll see CX Beys with actual gimmicks. Kind of like how back in like Beyblade Burst, like when we get a new system, they usually be pretty bland to start off with before eventually introducing gimmicks to them. Like look at like GT or Sparking for an example. I think we might see something like that, and then eventually, we get gimmicks with the CX Beys, and then as it happens, UX Beys kind of get phased out. I think that'd make the most sense, and again, kind of keeps the idea of building on the systems while keeping at least two systems relevant at a time. I think that worked pretty well for it. So anyway, but yeah, just my random input here. I do think it's about time for BX Beys to be done. I do think they will be done. I don't think we're going to see any actual new BX Beys past February of next year. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you think. Am I just rambling about nothing, or is it about time for them to actually be done? Let me know. But anyways, that's all for this video. So yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.